yeah, like what we've started to develop is what we're calling the decentralized AI stack. I'm not sure whether it's been defined before, but it's inspired by the Web3 stack for building decentralized applications. And in this case, of course, we're going to build like decentralized AI applications. And also there's like huge overlaps between the DeSci stack as well. So for anyone who heard Sebastian speak yesterday, they talked about the Web3 infrastructure, the funding part of the stack, and also the physical execution layer in terms of like compute and storage and things like this. And so, yeah, there's lots of similarities there. And yeah, okay, let's dive into it. So first of all, why decentralized AI? And why don't we just build centralized AI applications on top of this new data infrastructure? And there's two stories that I always tell people, so I probably told a lot of you yesterday, but is it not loud enough?
Louder.
Louder? Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, so there's two stories that I always tell people about why we want to build decentralized AI applications instead of centralized AI applications. And these come from my experiences in startups, universities, and tech companies working in AI. And so the first one is that when I finished my PhD, I had this idea for an AI application, motion analysis for sports physiotherapy applications. And so I wanted to get funding to fund this startup. And the funding required that I went into the university to complete the research and development. And of course, as soon as you go into the university, they own the ideas and IP that come out of the project. And so then when you go to spin out, if you want to get access to your IP, the university takes 10% of the company, and in return for that 10%, you don't even get ownership of your IP back. You have to pay royalties on your IP every time it's used. And so this makes it more difficult to raise VC, for example, because the ownership structure is more difficult. And then we ended up, being stuck with government funding, which of course is a really slow process. And you have things like review panels with, you might get unlucky with one reviewer, and then you can't get funding for your startup. And so I think at the point where we started building in the Ocean ecosystem, I was 18 months trying to get traditional funding in the real world, and that finally came through 2 years later. But after 18 months, I started to look up different funding sources, found Ocean there. Within 1 month, I got like our first grant, which was when we could like start to hire developers and really start to build. So it really kickstarted my project, this Web3 funding. The other story that I always tell people is that I worked in a big tech company. I didn't know what project I was going to be on when I joined, and then I found out I was put on the surveillance team. So in my first week of work there, I got given this data set of millions of images from surveillance cameras and asked to track people across different views with really high accuracy. So I sort of wrestled with this idea for a while, talked to a lot of people, colleagues, saying, are you okay with working on this? And what I kind of came to the realization was that a lot of generally well-meaning people will work on things that aren't necessarily good for the world when it's given to them as a top-down task. And so one of our theories that we have with Albavera is that if we can, empower bottom-up people to work on these projects that they're really passionate about, they will be generally more good for the world. Things like climate and healthcare applications, and not some of this stuff that's bad, like surveillance, ad clicks, and attention engineering. Okay, so I just talked about some of the issues with like organization and ownership structures of the way AI is done at the moment. And we want to try and develop new organizational structures. So we started to analyze like what makes up a tech company or a university, and do we now have the tools to coordinate without this centralized entity? In other words, is a tech company just a middleman that we can remove, like we're starting to do with banks? And so yeah, this is where the decentralized AI stack started to develop. So funding is a big part of the stack, of course, and I talked about that with the ownership models. I talked about that with the funding from government agencies in VC. I also talked about the issue of ownership of data, but of course, ownership of data is another big issue. So centralized companies have a lot of control of the different data that's used in their apps. There's also organization, which is a big component of the stack. So currently, all of the meetings, all of the coordination happens within tech companies. And so that's currently centralized. And is there some way that we can decentralize organization through tools like DAOs and things like this? And of course then, the cloud infrastructure is really centralized. It's owned by 3 or 4 big companies, and they have huge profit margins. And that's a huge expense for startups. So if we can decentralize this, maybe we can democratize access to this cloud infrastructure more. And so there's already projects in Web3 that are focusing on different aspects of this. So of course, Ocean Protocol are focusing on ownership of data and IP. Protocol Labs are focusing on like decentralizing the cloud. And so we're trying to figure out like what do we want to focus on with Algovera and which components of this stack can we decentralize. And so we describe Algovera in 3 different layers. So community, infrastructure, and commercialization. We really started off like building a community around decentralized AI. And we used to do things like run hacking sessions with data scientists and try to figure out how can we build AI applications in Web3. We also do things like hackathons and even just discussions around like the importance of decentralized AI and AI ethics and things like this. Through running our hacking sessions, we figured out issues with the current way of building decentralized AI applications. And so like the focus of Algovera is to make it as easy as possible to build these decentralized AI applications through things like tools, libraries, and integrations. And finally, the commercialization part. So we want to help early stage AI projects to get funding and build successful projects. I often say that like the main thing that I want to do is get as many people to quit their jobs in tech companies as possible and just work for themselves. So the thing with building AI applications is that it's actually really hard. So like compared to traditional software development, you need more different stakeholders to come together to build something useful. So for example, something you don't have in traditional software development is the domain expert. So this is it could be a scientist, like a neuroscientist, for example, that knows the data really well, helps to label the data and also to interpret the results. And they might need to work together with like a data scientist, for example, and also other stakeholders, like for example, some more commercial, maybe an app developer and design and things like this. And so how can we make it easier for people to organize online and build things? And that's where we started to explore this idea of DAOs. So let's say I meet someone on a Discord server and we're both passionate about a certain AI application. And let's say we want to start a project together and get funded. Like how would you do that in the traditional world? You would have to, set up bank accounts in each of your different countries. Maybe set up a shared bank account. How would you set up a company together? It would be really difficult. And that's where DAOs come in. You could just go to an app, spin up a DAO, and within minutes you have access to a shared treasury where you can get funding. And you also have access to some sort of on-chain voting mechanism. So you can vote on proposals, for example, and you can also execute transactions. So that's a great start, but a lot of the DAO frameworks that exist today are built for general Web3 users, and you can't perform all of the actions that you need to take to build an AI application. And so one thing that would be really useful, for example, would be if you could publish an asset somewhere like the Ocean Marketplace, but do it in a trustless manner. And that's not currently possible. What you need to do is, for example, trust one person to publish the asset and then transfer ownership of that asset to the DAO through, for example, a data NFT. But even that has only become possible with V4 of Ocean. So that's one thing, to be able to publish and co-own assets as an organization. And then the next step, of course, is to share in the value that's generated by that asset. So, when that asset is consumed, how can we ensure that the different members of a team, see the rewards? And so this is all sort of stuff that we want to build with our DAO framework. And how we kind of envision the working app, it's going to be something like a combination of existing DAO frameworks, like DAOhouse and OneHive, for example, the Ocean Marketplace, and also Hugging Face. I don't know if anyone knows Hugging Face, but it's a popular data science platform where you can demo apps, you can demo algorithms, but of course it's all Web 2. You can't monetize any of these, and also you don't own what you put up on that website. And so how do we get teams into these DAO frameworks and coordinating? We currently use a few different ways. So we started Algovera Grants program. So we've run 2 rounds of this, and we funded 12 different squads through micro grants. These are small grants at the moment. But after we fund these teams, which we call squads, we set them up within this DAO framework with this shared treasury, and hopefully in future they'll have access to this additional functionality that they need to be successful. And another way is freelance work. So we've completed one freelance work with a medical image project to develop medical image classification algorithms, for example. And we're also working on face anonymization algorithms with another project. And also we hope that squads come from hackathons as well. So we ran a hackathon with Lynx, who are to classify EEG data, for example, which could be used in BCI algorithms. And we hope that winning teams from this could become squads that then go on to further develop their projects, maybe get funding and things like this. So these are examples of some of the different squads in our ecosystem at the moment. So the first two have actually graduated from Algofair grants to go on and get grants from OceanDAO, which are larger, and we kind of help and support them with that. So one of them is time series forecasting for predicting the borrowing cost of different DeFi protocols. So maybe you can save money by predicting what the borrowing cost is going to be into the future. You can see an example of their app here that they built using Streamlit, which works with Hugging Face. The next one is the application is using AI drones and computer vision models within AI drones to monitor the Earth. And so they're using collection some synthetic data that is generated in virtual worlds, and they're also scraping the web for real data to try to achieve this. Munchies Index is an interesting one. They're using natural language processing to gather sentiment about cannabis products and things like this. We also have a decentralized healthcare squad. They're working on a white paper for their DAO, which is going to be called Hope DAO, and they're trying to gather data about clinical trials for mental health drugs. And also they're looking into decentralized clinical trials and things like this. Smart NFT Search, they use natural language processing to search different NFTs. Apparently search isn't that good on OpenSea at the moment, and natural language processing can be used to improve it. And then we have a few other ones. Some of them are more infrastructure, so using how can we use DAOs, how can we crowdsource human intelligence tasks and integrate them with smart contracts. And so you can do really cool things with crowdsourcing data through a scripting language, which also interacts with smart contracts and DAOs. Okay, so just starting the projects is just the first step. What we really want to do is make it as easy as possible for these projects to get from idea to production-ready AI application. And this is actually a really hard process. So I was working on an AI startup before, and there's a really long process of gathering the data. For example, startups can gather data for anything up to a year before they even start training the models. So we want to make this easier through things like data marketplaces. Also, we want to make it easier and cheaper for them to use infrastructure like cloud. Like I said, AWS is a massive expense for startups, and so if we can, give them more access to decentralized compute and storage, that will make it easier for them to be successful. And also, the technologies that you need to use to create an AI application are quite fragmented. There's a huge number of components, and so how can we better integrate these and make that experience better? So we started building our AI applications in the Ocean Protocol ecosystem. And this is actually a working product. You can build decentralized AI applications right now. And many things need to come together. And I think the smart thing that Ocean did was that they wanted to focus on these data NFTs and the IP and also the provenance of data, which is going to go on-chain. But you can't just have that. You can't build an application with just that. And so what Ocean provide is this. They provide the compute component, they provide the storage component, access control, all of these different components. And for sure, some of these are still centralized. Compute is done mostly through AWS at the moment. But by having a working solution to begin, then you can start to gradually decentralize different parts of the stack and improve it there. This is on the bottom. You can see all the different steps that's required for building an AI app. I'm hoping David will talk a bit more about this, the long process and all the different tools that you use for the different steps. But there's a huge amount of different technologies. And finally, so we have a token engineering model for launching AI startups. But it's something that I'd love to look into in the future, and something like Common Stack, but maybe customized for AI, and still public goods, but public goods that can also bring in more revenue. And so that's just AI projects. We have opportunities for data scientists who just want to work on different projects. So we have freelance work, we run hackathons, and also tournaments. Yeah, and these are some of the things I was just talking about. So this is where our demo day is going to be in the metaverse. Also, I mentioned the hackathon that we ran with Links, the freelance project that we did on the medical image classification project, a recent website that our DeFi squad has just launched for time series forecasting, and also working with the AI drones project to communicate their ideas down here. And so what I'm really excited about with this workshop is that we're starting to bring people together in the decentralized AI space. And like we're really inspired by how much progress the DeSci community has made. Like when I joined Web3 just over about a year ago, it was still like really fragmented. There were people working on DeSci, but there was no community. And like for those of you who saw that graphic yesterday of all of the different like projects that are now in the DeSci ecosystem, I would love in like a year or 2 years to have something similar for decentralized AI, because it's such a big problem to tackle. And so the more different projects in the space working on their own niche components, the better. So yeah, hopefully we can like maybe start that today. Like maybe this is the thing that starts the decentralized AI community coming together. Hopefully we can like collaborate on some cool things. So yeah, let's collaborate on the infrastructure. If you want to build your AI projects, like let's see if you need access to infrastructure or any of the different stuff that we're building. And yeah, let's build an ecosystem. So with that, I wonder does anyone have any questions? So we're trying to make these different tracks for people who want to be onboarded in different ways. I think onboarding of data scientists is a really important problem. Data scientists are naturally skeptical of crypto in general, in my experience, and so yeah, it's a really important part of the problem. So yeah, we have different tracks at the moment. So if someone wants to start an AI project, we have the create track. If someone wants to join an existing project, we have the join track. If you just want to freelance, there's different tracks, or maybe you want to contribute to the kind of inner workings of Algorithmic DAO. So that's like the contribute track. So we've documented all of this stuff and steps for how to get involved. But apart from that, just jump onto the Discord. That's the main place where everything happens, and people can just ask questions or even reach out to me today, and we can work on some collaborations.
What are your biggest concerns with the current setup with big tech, and how would you like to solve those with this?
Yeah, so I think, like I was talking about, the AI stack has many components, and a lot of them are centralized. And so I think some of the applications that are being worked on aren't ideal. It's not as open as it could be. OpenAI isn't open. Everything's behind paywalls and stuff. And so I just worry about all of these really powerful AI models being controlled by just a few people and with limited access. And so if we can democratize that access, I think that would be great. And also, I think there's just less diversity of research in AI at the moment. There's a big debate on Twitter at the moment. Is scaling all we need to get to AGI? And a lot of people seem to think it is. And they're starting to build hardware just for transformers and stuff. But what's happening in the AI world is we're just focusing on neural networks and transformers. And there's a whole other field of machine learning and AI that isn't being as explored as it could. And I think that's because of the centralization of tech companies. And even the universities aren't that independent anymore because tech companies have a big influence on them. And so I've seen on Twitter people who don't think neural networks are going to lead us to AGI, but they say that they have to work on it to keep their job in a centralized AI company. So if we can have more people working on different experiments in a more decentralized research organization, I think that would be really positive.
You mentioned that you plan to build your own DAO framework that is, serving your requirements. What are you missing with the current DAO frameworks you've mentioned? OneHive Gardens maybe, or DAO House?
Yeah, so you can't publish an asset on a marketplace through a DAO at the moment. So that's one big thing. Another one is the profit sharing aspect of it isn't well defined. Arweave have profit sharing communities, for example, but we've been playing around with it as one of the squads that we funded actually, and it just doesn't have everything that we need. So I think something in that case, something like profit sharing communities on Arweave, but to fix some of the issues that we found with it when we were trying to use it. The thing with Arweave is the miners are all CPU based, so it's hard to create something that relies on a graphics card and share profit around that. So that's something that we fix.
So, really shortly, really covered this academically. Do you have any specific on people who aren't data scientists necessarily, but like interface with data, for example, like bioinformaticians, people like that, stand to benefit very strongly from a decentralized data storage and access infrastructure, those types of those. So how does onboarding differ for those people? What measures do they take?
Yeah, it's a good question. So like, I'm a data scientist, so I tend to talk about data scientists a lot, but we want like lots of different stakeholders. It takes, like I said, it takes lots of different types of stakeholders to come together to create something useful. And so like, as a data scientist, I know more data scientists, and I'm good at talking to data scientists, so I think that's probably why there's like more data science focus. But we would love to like onboard more domain experts from different areas, and that's where we've worked on like hackathons with neuroscientists, for example. We've worked with like medical image doctors, and like the aim there is to bring data scientists together with the domain experts and create something that is really useful, because you need like both of those sides to come together. And then also we want to like develop the commercial side more. So at the moment it's kind of like us doing the commercial development of all of these different AI projects, but ideally in the future we would have like, you know, commercial experts coming in and contributing to the ecosystem in that way. Any more questions? Cool. All right.